Hi, I'm Nelson, and this is the Sir Nelson IELTS and General English Training. In this video, we are going to learn how to answer description questions. What are description questions and how should you answer them? If you do that, you will be able to speak beautiful English. You will be able to speak English like a native. IELTS Speaking Part 1, Description Questions. We are going to learn how to answer such questions. Enjoy learning English, learn English, and make your dreams come true. Let's begin the lesson. Tell me about the house, flat you live in. Number 2, describe your hometown. Number 3, tell me about your job. Number 4, tell me about your family. Number 5, tell me about your city. These questions are description questions. They tell you to describe, to say something about anything. How do you answer these questions? You can answer them in the same way. The difference is the vocabulary. For example, description structures. When responding to description questions, you need to begin with a conversation fillers. You need to begin with a conversation filler. What are conversation fillers? These words are used by native speakers. They are called conversation fillers. It's a good habit to train yourself to use them. Let's read them. Read after me. Number 1, okay then. Number 2, all right. 3, well, you know. 4, actually. 5, right, okay. 6, well. 7, well. First of all, these are called conversation fillers, and they are very important if you want to speak beautiful English. Whenever they ask you any question in English, train yourself to use them a lot. Exercise 1. Now get your notebook and write. This is speaking, but you can write such that you can memorize all these phrases. Remember to get your book and first copy all this in your book. Make sure you have the date written. First, copy all these conversation fillers in your book, number 1 up to 7. Exercise 2. You jump a line and we go to this slide. Exercise 1. Describe your hometown. We are going to develop the answer together. How do we answer this question? You begin with a conversation filler. Now, from the conversation fillers you have written, choose only 2 and you write them. Separate them with a comma. Choose 2 conversation fillers and you write them. After, jump a line and we go to the next slide. We can add a pointing phrase next. After the 2 conversation fillers, the next thing is the pointing phrase. The pointing phrase shows the listener that the first point is coming. You have to warn the listener that now I'm going to give you the first point. Now these are the pointing phrases. Let's read them together. Read after me. The first thing I should mention is that. Number 2, the point I would like to begin with is that. Number 3, I could start off by saying that. Number 4, my initial point would be that. Number 5, I need to start off by pointing out that. These are called pointing phrases. They show that my first point about my hometown is coming. Remember, copy all of them such that you can easily memorize them. When you write something, it is easier to remember it. First, copy all of them, number 1 up to 5. Exercise 2. Describe your hometown. Choose 2 conversation fillers. You already have those. Now, add 1 pointing phrase. Choose 1 pointing phrase and you add it to your 2 conversation fillers. Now, next, think about 1 point you can describe about your hometown. It could be location, size, appearance, the buildings, etc. Do not give the name, as this is not really describing, and the name would probably be in another language. So you would not be using examples of topic-related vocabulary. We don't need the name of your hometown as yet. Now, is your hometown a village or a city? You are going to tell us. Village and city are common words. So we are going to learn some less common words. If it is a village, you will call it rural. If it's a city, you will call it urban. So the sentence will either be, it is urban or it is rural. After telling us whether it is urban or rural, you have to put the word in fact. Read after me. In fact. The word in fact means you are adding details to the sentence you have given. Before you give details, you can use the word in fact. For example, it is rural. Why do you say it is rural? You should add some details. What is a rural area? What is there? So you say it is rural, in fact, and you add the first details. In addition, there are many things that can show that an area is rural. You need only 2. First, write the details about the first one, and then you give another example, another detail to show us why your hometown is rural. Also, if it is urban, give us details. You have to use the word in fact to introduce the details. Tell us 2 details about your hometown. Why is it rural or urban? Remember, you choose 1. Exercise 3. Describe your hometown. Choose 2 conversation fillers, which you already have. Add 1 pointing phrase, which you already have. Now choose 1 point, which is either rural or urban, and add details. Next, second pointing phrase. We have talked about 1 point about our hometown. We need to add a second one. Now, these pointing phrases, they warn the listener that now I'm going to give you my second point. Let's read them together. Read after me. Number 1. Another point which I could add is that. Number 2. A second feature which I should mention is that. Number 3. As well as that, I could say that. Number 4. On top of that, I can also add that. Number 5. Also, I suppose I should say that. Remember, copy all these phrases in your book. Next, we are going to talk about the weather. The second point, we shall talk about the weather. The weather, we are going to use this sentence. The weather is sometimes good and sometimes bad. In fact, the word in fact introduces details. When is it good? What happens during that time? When is it bad? What happens during that time? Those are the details that we expect you to add to this sentence. Now, before you do that, exercise 4. The question is, describe your hometown. Choose 2 conversation fillers. Add 1 pointing phrase. Choose 1 point about your town and add details, which you have. Add a second point. remember, to add a second point, you need a pointing phrase, and then you talk about the weather. Talk about the weather, and then you add the details. Third pointing phrase. We know two things about your hometown. We know whether it is a village or a city. We know about the weather. We need to add a third point. And we are going to use these pointing phrases. For example, read after me. And I shouldn't forget to mention that in addition to what I've just said, I can add that something else that I need to comment on is that I guess I could also remark on the fact that remember to copy all these in your book. Possible topics. You can talk about the infrastructure. Infrastructure means roads, buildings. You can talk about the economy. You can talk about the politics. You can talk about the religion. You can talk about the people. You can talk about the food. Choose only one and say a sentence. Add the details. Remember, the details are introduced by the word in fact. Get one topic, create a sentence, then you add the details. Exercise 5. Lastly, you add a third pointing phrase. After the pointing phrase, add the point and the details.